Hey, thanks. I didn't know it said that. There must be some sort of setting I can turn off or turn on. So this is what I need you guys to do on your machine. If you want to compare what I'm doing in Photoshop, if you want to check it out in your whatever graphics editor you have on your machine. So if you haven't installed something separately, then whatever comes on there by default. If you've got Windows 10, you should have Paint 3D. That's probably about the best you're going to do on Windows 10. If you've got an older version of Windows, you may just have Paint, right? Which is even worse, even less options there. Did anybody try installing GIMP?
Yeah.
You did?
I got this on this machine.
Oh yeah. So what have you played around with it at all?
A little bit.
Yeah. All right. So that it's going to be interesting. I was hoping maybe Nathan had, because he had mentioned it last week, and I thought, well, maybe he's got some familiarity with it already. But I have no experience with GIMP. And so I was just reading some of the reviews online, and it actually looks pretty good, but I'm not sure, like feature by feature, how it compares with Photoshop. All right. So I'd be kind of curious as we're going through this. I'm going to stop sometimes and ask you guys, does your program have anything like that? Right. There's one feature in particular, which is really, to me, it was what sold me on Photoshop and why I think it's such a great tool. But anyway, I am curious with some of the other details, how your particular photo editor or graphics editor compares. So I teach chemistry here. Most of you know that. And I know you guys are all familiar with Captain Chemistry. Right? I mean, who hasn't heard of Captain Chemistry? Really? Wow, where you been? Did you live in a cave? Yes. So Captain Chemistry actually stopped by my house one day. He was just kind of visiting local chemistry teachers in the area. And as it turned out, I was shocked. And there is a kind of a quirky resemblance between the two of us, right? I mean, clearly he wears goggles and I don't. And he's a little shorter than I am, right? So there's some distinct differences, but there was like this rumor going around that somehow we were the same person, And so I asked him, could I get a photograph while he was there? And so we took this picture while he was at my house, and I was actually in the middle of recording a chemistry video, so it's perfect timing. Just proof in case that comes up, if any of you guys kind of hear that rumor, here it is, we've put that rumor to rest, right? So this is kind of odd. Do you see how my head's kind of crooked? Can you notice this is like a little bit skewed? Can you tell it's like pointing that way a little bit? That's something on my phone. And I haven't figured out yet what on my phone, when you take photographs, it's like when it gets near the edge of the photograph, it distorts it. So if anybody has for Samsung phones, if you know what the key is to make that stop happening and you want to share that with me, that would be great. But I'm going to kind of use this picture as an example as we go through Photoshop today, just to kind of show you how I put something like that together. But I've got Photoshop already launched here, and Photoshop, you can create original art or modify existing pictures, right? That's kind of how it was touted to begin with, right? You bring in a photograph and then you can touch up different things. And we've got a lot of tools. You've got probably a tool on your phone, I'm sure, that will let you take red eye out of pictures and different things like that, right? There's a lot of tools out there now that do some of these kind of basic just enhancement or modifications of existing photographs. But Photoshop really, just had a lot of options. And as it turns out, whenever they released it, a lot of people started using Photoshop just to create original raster images, original artwork, raster artwork. What did we say was the difference between raster and vector images?
Raster images are made with just pixels,
right?
Like each individual pixel, and vector images are made from an equation.
That's right.
A bunch of equations.
Right. So the two key things with vector images versus raster images is that vector images are usually bigger or smaller in size.
Much bigger.
Vector images are bigger?
No.
No. Did I say raster? Vector images. Vector images are usually much smaller, right? Because they just have to store the mathematical equations for the points and the lines between the points. And the other plus with vector images is, anybody remember what the other big plus is with vectors? You can easily resize it without any loss of image quality, right? Because it's sort of building it on the fly as you say, hey, I want this vector image to be this size here. And it it runs the math again and recreates that image. And it's like, no pixelation and things like that you have to deal with raster images if you blow it up. Shrinking down raster images usually works pretty well, but when you try to make them larger, right, that's when you start seeing the pixelation. So Photoshop is predominantly a raster image tool, right? I think I showed you guys last week, and I forgot to look this up. There is a way to, because I like almost never use this feature in Photoshop, so I always have to look it up. There is a way to create some vector images in Photoshop. And what I couldn't find last week was how you trace it once we created that vector image. But for the most part, think of it as a raster image tool, right? So you can create original artwork. Like I said, it's pretty, a lot of people do neat things by plugging in a graphics tablet where you've got a little pen, right? And you can kind of draw like that. My niece is just an excellent artist with stuff like that. And then you can touch it up, choose your different brushes and things like that. Existing images, you can rotate, resize, add text, change colors, add special effects to it. There's just all sorts of things that we just don't have time to cover everything because Photoshop will do so much. And there's a lot of different file types that you can save your images as. So like I've got this graphic here open in Photoshop. And if I go to, I don't know if save as, let's see if save as gives me all those. I know export shows me a lot. So save as only gives me PSD, which is Photoshop's format. I think that stands for Photoshop document is what PSD stands for. PSB, I don't even know what that is. Photoshop PDF, since this is an Adobe tool, it would kind of make sense that you could create an Acrobat file as well from it. And then TIFF, which is a really large graphics file that is, I think it's a lossless. So in other words, it's not compressed in any way. I believe that's the case with TIFFs. But if I go to export here, you'll see even more options. File, export. If I go to save this, export as, I can choose, wow, it's even less. Where is bitmap and stuff like that? PNGs, JPEGs, and GIFs are the only things that are listed here. So I'm going to have to research that. Generate, export as, export preferences. Like I don't see, you should be able to save something as a bitmap. At least you used to could do that. So I don't know where that is now. Maybe save a copy. Let's try that. Save a copy. Oh, here we go. All right. So there's a whole bunch of different file types. If I go to save a copy, BMP bitmaps on there, that's what your Windows editor is going to try to, at least the old Paint. I don't know what the new Paint does, but the old Paint tried to always save it as a bitmap file, which are usually pretty good size. GIFs, JPEGs, PCX, Photoshop RAW. So those are really large files with no compression. Targa, which I know nothing about, and then TIFF. So I just remember TIFF like way back when I was having to do some of this stuff when I first started at work, and we were working on some of the things like the Philips Arena website. We would get these high quality, high resolution images, that they wanted us to put on the website, and they were always in this TIFF format, and they were huge. So it's a really good quality, but the price that you pay for that is they're very, very large in file size as well. So you can save in all kinds of formats, but the most common that you're going to deal with these days in Photoshop is you're going to save something as a Photoshop file if you want to preserve all the features that you have in Photoshop. But then if you're going to put it somewhere else, right, you're probably going to save it as a PNG or a GIF file. Some people, did we talk about this? Some people say GIF instead of GIF, right? And we said that it makes more sense to say GIF. Why? Because GIF stands for graphical, graphical, not graphical, right? But you can say GIF if you want to. I'll only dock like a point or two from your test. But no, GIF is how I learned it, but a lot of people say GIF now. So GIFs are pretty common. GIFs are common if you're dealing with like drawings that have a limited number of colors in it. But when you're dealing with photographs, what's the more common file type to save your photographs as? Does anybody know? Huh? PNG? We could try PNG, but usually like on your cell phone, if you take a picture on your cell phone, what's the standard file type that it saves it as? JPEG, right? JPG. So JPEGs were really, they're kind of, typically the way that I go is if it's like picture, usually JPEG is going to, like when I say picture, like a photograph that I take with a digital camera, JPEG is going to be the better choice. If it's something that's kind of hand drawn that maybe isn't going to have as many colors as that picture, that I take, then a PNG or a GIF is a good choice. And sometimes I kind of play around with it to see which one has the smaller file size and make a choice based on that. Any questions about file sizes and what the purpose of the various file sizes are? All right, what about, so I mentioned last week, just briefly, that Photoshop has this history, number of history items, history states that you can change. And I couldn't find it because it had been moved to a different location. But I did find that. So in Photoshop, if you go to preferences and then performance, there is a setting in there that will let you define the number of history states. And I've bumped mine up to 50. It's set to, by the way, tell me if you can't see something, because I do have this little magnifier tool and I can launch that and let's see, zoom in here and make it a little, there we go, make it a little easier to see. So I've bumped the history states up to 50. It's by default, it's 20, and you can bump that up all the way to 1,000. But here's the problem. The higher that you make it, the more information Photoshop's having to keep up with as you're doing work in Photoshop. And so your machine's probably going to get really sluggish. So unless you've got a really, really beefy machine, you probably don't want it too high. 50 is sort of a good number. I figure when I start tweaking things here and there, I probably won't get past 50 as far as wanting to go backwards and undo the work that I've done. But I have before. I actually, on my other machine at home, which is a little beefier than this one, I've got this set at 100. But that's kind of a nice handy feature. And that allows you to, let's see, I figured out how to do this. There we go. That allows you to, oh, wait a minute, what is this? If I hit the magnifying glass there. Oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be. Never mind. To go backwards, like I said, here's my history state right here on this panel. And the only thing we've done so far with this particular image is we just opened it. But as I do work here, this history panel will start adding things to what I've done. If I were to draw on there, it would show the pen tool that I'd used the pen tool, and it'll just keep adding things to the history list. And so if at some point I'm like, you know what, I want to go all the way back to not the open state, but just after the open state, I could click on that and it would go all the way back there in my undo panel. So that's a really handy feature in Photoshop. I don't know how many other tools have that. I know that the stuff that comes standard on the computer does not, right? So let's look at, if you've got your book with you, page 53 has a picture on it that kind of shows you the layout, the default layout of Photoshop. And they definitely, Adobe does a nice job of letting you kind of customize the screen to match, what your particular preferences are. But sort of the default layout is listed on page 53 there. And you'll see like title bar, tool options bar. Let's see if I can put that. Oh, you can't see it. It's over here in this little tiny corner, but tool options bar, toolbar, status bar, palettes. And so just kind of to go through that quickly, I guess the first thing is the workspace. So basically all of this area that's, so this is our title bar up at the very top. And then down below that is the tool options bar. And then everything all the way down below that on both sides here would be considered your workspace. So when you talk about your workspace area, it's kind of this stuff in the middle of the screen. And then down at the very bottom here, you have a status bar, which has some information. And then you call these, this stuff over here on the right, Photoshop refers to these as palettes. And the palettes can kind of be moved around and rearranged. I've got like this floating palette here, which has character information, text information. I'm actually going to close that, but we can reopen it later. So that's kind of sort of the layout of the LAN, so to speak. And workspace title bar, up here in the top is going to have, this is where all your menus are for opening and closing stuff, or help is up here. If you've got multiple images open, they would show up under your window drop down. You've got filters and some different options that you can also do from the toolbar over here on the left, but they're in the menu up top. Let's see, the tool options bar, whichever tool you've got selected, then there are options for that tool in this area right here in the middle, in between your workspace and your title bar. And so we'll talk about that as we look at some of these specific tools here, some of the options that you can set on those tools. Like I said, the palettes over here kind of keep track of some useful information, which we'll go through some of that. One of the obvious ones that should kind of make sense to everybody here is I can pick a different color, right? That I'm going to draw in or write in, depending on if I'm doing text or drawing. I can choose that color over here. And if I choose it here, then you'll see that it's reflected down here. This area here in your toolbar kind of always shows you which, that's over here on the bottom left, shows you which color is in the foreground at the moment. I'll take that back down to black. There we go. And then what is it? Palette status bar. So status bar just has a little bit of information. Let me zoom in here and show you the status bar. Down here on the bottom, the status bar tells you things like, right now, the image that I'm looking at is not full screen. We're at 66%. So it's displaying on the screen 2/3 of its actual size. And then this is the actual size of the image that I'm working with. It's 1920 pixels by, it looks kind of weird, that X after the first X is by, right? Like you say, a 2x4 or whatever. 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels and 72 PPI. Does anybody know what PPI stands for? And yes. Pixels per inch, exactly. So this is kind of the standard when you're doing web stuff. Creating web graphics, 72 pixels per inch is kind of the standard for that. So that's what it'll default to typically when you choose, when you first create an image and it's going to be an image for the web. So let me zoom back down. There we go. And so that's kind of our little panels. Any questions about the way the screen is organized? I guess a question for you is, how does that compare to the way your graphics program is set up? Is yours dramatically different?
The setup is a lot different. I'm
Right.
just, playing around with this and figuring out how I can do just anything in here.
Right.
Okay, like the information is very much the same.
Right.
So I can find all of the information I need relatively easily. I can find the location, I can find, the size of it,
Mhm.
but the tools are harder to find.
Yeah, I got you. So you've got the little toolbar like
Yes.
I've got down the left side, but yours is kind of like a bigger sort of square area in the top left
Yes.
corner. Seems like a bunch of wasted space on that color thing. So I'm trying, was it by
Yeah,
that size by default, or did you adjust the size of this area?
That's how it
This
was
is
by
how it was?
default,
Okay.
but I'm
Gotcha.
pretty sure I can change all
Does
of
that
this,
change
but
out as you click? Like if you click one of the
tabs, then yes, I can
there's
change the
tabs.
tabs.
I got you.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's similar. So you're using
Yeah.
Paint 3D. So very limited as far as the features that you're seeing on Photoshop compared to what you see here, right? Few buttons up here that you can choose some different things. There's a bunch of buttons on the left-hand side of Photoshop, so it's kind of clear out of the box that it's going to do more. You're using the older Paint.
I don't have.
You what now? Yeah, you don't. So you're probably not using Windows 10, maybe. Maybe this is Windows 8. Which is fine. Again, this is all part of trying to see how it compares. So yours is very, very limited tools here. Got kind of a big section for color information. Are you guys using anything different, or is it the same kind of stuff?
Trying to figure out this again.
You're trying to use GIMP? Okay, gotcha. Yep. All right. You have Photoshop, right? Cool, perfect. Yes, you may. And then are you using Paint or Paint 3D? What is it? Paint 3D? Yeah. So, okay, all right, so we got kind of all of the other three competing ones that I mentioned, different people are using those. So that's good. That you'll kind of be able to talk to some of these features as I go through them in Photoshop and tell me, tell me if yours has that, or if it does, if you don't think it does, it's like, I have no idea where to find it if it is on there. But for the most part, except for GIMP, right? If you guys are looking at Paint 3D or Paint, Photoshop, just at a glance, you can look at it and say, wow, there's a bunch of stuff in here that I don't see any way to do that on mine. Now, it is interesting. There are some things that like Paint 3D, for example, brings to the table that Photoshop doesn't have. Like the whole idea of 3D objects, sticking those on the page, that's not in Photoshop. So that's kind of unique to Paint 3D. So there are going to be some things that's going to be easier for you to do in Paint 3D.
In GIMP, you can work with 3D models.
Okay.
I have no clue how to do that.
So yeah, that's just a feature that Photoshop decided, I guess we're not gonna fool with that right now. And I don't know if you have tools like these that it becomes, kind of more standard and people are wanting that, then Photoshop will probably incorporate it in future releases. Well, now I may be telling you a fib here. All right, so it does say new 3D layer from file, new 3D exclusion. So I don't know. Let me try creating a new layer here and see what happens. 3D stuff is all grayed out. So that's just an area. It looks like maybe you're bringing in 3D from another tool. Maybe you create it with another tool and then you can bring it in and work with it in Photoshop. But it's not something that I've fooled with specifically. Oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna create a rectangle. When did I do that? Well, let me see. Where did that come from? All right, let me try creating a new layer here and let me see what happens. 3D. Okay, there is some options. Spherical panorama, but it wants me to import that. New panorama. New 3D extrusion from selected layer. Yeah, I'm not even going to try to go down that path because I'm going to get lost. So that's definitely something new. It used to not be in Photoshop, and it's not anything that I've ever fooled with. So if you have Photoshop, you might want to play around with the 3D menu and see what's involved in that. But I'm going to kind of stick to the standard stuff that's been there for a long time as I go through the tool. And I will say, for me, kind of the biggest thing that sold me on Photoshop and has been so useful as I've used the tool over the years is that Photoshop has this idea of layers. And you sort of have something like that in Paint 3D. You don't have that at all in original Paint. I would assume probably GIMP has layers, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're going to try to take Photoshop on, you're going to have to put that in your tool. But the nice thing about layers is it gives you like different paint. It's kind of like, think about it like an architectural drawing or something, that's got those transparent pages where they kind of lay down on top of one another. And you guys, if you've seen the first Iron Man, he had something like that in the first Iron Man when he was designing it in the cave and he didn't want them to see what he was building. So you take all the kind of transparent layers and you put them down on top of one another, and then you can see the full thing, That's the way layers work. So you can kind of work on a particular piece of paper, so to speak, and they lay on top of one another, and you can make it transparent where the things behind it show through or they don't show through. And so layers were the way that I built that original image that I showed you, where it's me with my arm around Captain Chemistry. And there's just so much that you can do with layers that you couldn't do if layers weren't there. So the layers by default are kind of over here in the bottom right hand side of your palettes area of the screen. And you can pretty much all of these palettes, you can adjust the size, move one up and down, right? So if I'm using a bunch of layers, I may want to make that one really big. So I could turn some stuff on and off here in my layers. So if I start kind of clicking here, that layer is a border that I've created. That layer kind of adds some extra fingers there. I'll show you what's going on there. So if I add this image here, this was the picture of me, right, dressed up as Captain Chemistry. So those were the two images that I had. I had this image here, which was the shot of me just with my arm out, and then I transform into Captain Chemistry, and I take this picture here. And we've got some issues that are obvious immediately, right? That this picture is much lighter, right? You can tell the background's much lighter here and then when I took this shot, something had changed with the lighting in the room, so it's definitely darker. But those are all things that Photoshop gives you the ability to modify. So I could do, for example, I could select this particular layer, and I'm not affecting the overall image. I'm only affecting this particular layer, and I could go up here to to mode and go to adjustments and choose brightness contrast. And I could just make this particular picture a little bit brighter, right? And so I could brighten it up a little bit and then check and see, well, now how does it compare to the other one? And now it's a little too bright. It's a little bit brighter. So I could kind of modify that and get it just like I wanted it. So those are some of the things that Photoshop gives you the ability to do on a layer basis. So you're only affecting that portion of your image. Now notice as I was doing that also, like I told you before, my number of undos is changing. So when I did that, when I was clicking the buttons, turning layers on and off, for every time, like every single thing you click in Photoshop, it's going to add something in your undo screen. So I clicked a couple of layers on and off to compare after I'd adjusted the brightness. Here's where I adjusted my brightness back up here. So I can just back up to all of that and click on this layer visibility one here. And it'll take away all of those other changes that I did. So it's real easy for you to kind of undo those things. That's what's so nice about the history here. But it does grow very quickly. And so that's why I said, if your computer can handle it, I'd probably set that at least 100 because every little click is going to add something else to your history state. And it's just nice. Sometimes you kind of go far down and you're like, that didn't turn out at all like I wanted it to turn out. And so you can just easily undo and go back up. So that was the other image that I took. And what I did is I cut myself out of that image. So here I am cut out of that, right? So I cut myself out of that layer and just put this portion of the picture in this photograph. But the problem that I found whenever I did that is where I had stood in front of the board here for the Captain Chemistry picture versus where I was standing here, it sort of covered up my hand. And I was like, well, to make it more believable, you need to be able to see my fingers actually coming around Captain Chemistry's shoulders, right? And so what I did there is I took the other photograph and I basically grabbed just my fingers here. And let's see, just my fingers there. And somewhere I must be hiding those extra fingers. There it is. Okay, so this particular layer here actually covers up the original fingers in the picture and adds a shadow behind him. So I'm just doing that by creating these different layers, and the layers were pretty much created from just cutting certain pieces of the other images and sort of splicing all those guys together, right? Until I get a final photograph that looks like this. So not particularly complicated, but but what's cool about it is the way that what we're going to see in a moment as we look at selections is how easy Photoshop makes it to do things like just select this portion of my hand in the original image like I wanted to do, just cut that portion out of it. So it has a lot of different, in the selection menu, a lot of different ways that we can choose, how we're going to create that selection and then copy it or cut it out of another image. But the power of layers, that can't be understated. It is so important that you get, like, what a big deal is that Photoshop allows you to do the layers. And so I can hide and show those. I can, like I showed a minute ago, I can apply specific effects to that layer. I can adjust things like the brightness or the contrast. There's this blending options thing that applies specifically to a layer. And the blending option will let me do things like if it was a ghostly Captain Chemistry, I could adjust his opacity, right? Make him a little bit where he's transparent and you can see through him. So I can adjust the opacity there. There's all kind of things that I can do here. I could cause him to have an outer glow. Where is that outer glow? Right here. So he's kind of where is I don't see much of a glow there. Oh, maybe because he's cut. Let me see. Let me try some of these other normal. No. Let me see what I'm missing here. Opacity. Oh, you can kind of see it down here on the bottom. You can see there's a little bit of a white on the outside there.
Extremely thick.
So I'm going to make it a little bit. So now I've made it a little bit harder by choosing normal. And I want to, there we go, spread. And spread. And then size. Yeah, there we go. So now Captain Chemistry's kind of got this glow behind him, right? So there's things like that you can do. You could add a shadow, a drop shadow onto him, which for this particular image, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I can do a color overlay. So now the Captain Chemistry portion that I cut out, I can make him totally gray, right? Or some other color. And I could even set an opacity on that. So I've overlaid the gray color, but then I'm going to make that a little bit transparent. So now it's just kind of giving giving that picture sort of a gray color over the top of it, but you can still see through it. So there's just all kinds of things. I mean, there's just no way I could go through everything that that Photoshop offers. And that's just looking at the layer panel, some of the things that are built into layers. Let's see, you can align stuff. So that's kind of a neat feature in Photoshop. So if I've got this, let's say I've got this background here. Well, here's my background image here, and I add a layer, and I've just got some text that I'm going to put on top of that. Let's see, here's my text tool, and I'm just going to type hello class, and make that bigger. So hello class. And so here's hello class, and whoops, wrong thing. And I put it up top here, but where I want this to be is I want it to be directly centered in the image here. So I could say, I could choose this other layer. So I held down the shift key and chose the other layer. I could do the control key and select the other layer so that I've got both layers selected down here. And then I can go to layer and align, and I can say I want the horizontal centers aligned. So now I just moved hello class so that it's in the middle here of the image, and it's aligned with the underlying background. So that it gives you a way to align stuff very easily. This is behind Captain Chemistry's head, so I don't like that. So now I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to drag it to the top. So it's at the actual top of the heap. So whoops, I accidentally drug the background as well. Because they're still connected together, let me select the background by itself and bring that back down. There we go. So now hello class is on top of his head, but it's kind of, because it's dark and Captain Chemistry's hair is dark, that's not good. So I'm going to put a glow around this guy. Blending options there. Let me put an outer glow. So hello class, and I'm going to make it, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stroke, which puts an outline on hello class, and we'll make the outline color to be white, and then we'll make the size to be something like that. So, you know, if I was really doing this, I would work a little more so that it stands out a bit more. But just kind of, again, showing you what I can do just on the layer level, how I can move them around and adjust which one's on top of the other. I can adjust the order just by dragging my layers there. So a lot of power in the layer stuff that you just can't do. You know, once I create something on Paint, on the old Microsoft Paint, I'm stuck with it where it is, right? I can't move it separately from, like if I draw a square on there, I can't move it separately from the background. But Photoshop, if I create that stuff on separate layers, then I can work on those layers independently of everything else, which is super, super useful. So I want you to take that away. If there's one feature that stands out to me above anything else, what makes Photoshop awesome is layers, right? So just kind of, this material is going to be sort of hard to test you guys on, right? Because you don't all have Photoshop. If we were all using Photoshop, then I could drill down into this aspect, this feature of it. But I just want you to kind of compare it with your tool and let you see what Photoshop has to offer in case it's something that you might be interested in getting into in the future. But there are a few things that I'll try to remember to write on the board that I just kind of stress that makes it unique and makes it really, to me, stand out above some of the other tools, and layers is a big part of that. Another big part of it is any questions about layers, just in general, how layers work, and does everybody understand the concept behind that? Are you, as you're playing around with GIMP there, are you seeing very similar functionality?
Yes, there is good layer functionality.
Okay, excellent, excellent. That's good to know. So let's see selections. Let's see how GIMP holds up to selections, right? So the fact that I was able to select some of this stuff on the original image, how was I able to do that? Well, there's a variety of selection options over here. I'm going to delete this hello class layer. There we go. There are a variety of selection. Actually, I'm not going to delete that. Let me undo that because I'm going to come back and use that when I talk about text in just a moment. Over here with selections, basically all of these top three, let me zoom in a minute so you can see that. So all of these kind of top three, this thing with it looks like a coordinate system, basically the two lines crossing up top there. That's where you move things. So if you've got that selected, if I were to come down here and drag on top of a layer, it's going to move whatever's in that layer. Since I've gotten the move tool selected right here, if I come down here and click and start trying to move, let's see, let me select that layer. So see how it's moving there. So that's what that tool does. But these three below it, this one, and this one, are all tools that are useful for selecting things in your image. So they're called, it's called the marquee tool. Notice this one says is the elliptical marquee tool. This one here is the lasso tool. This is the magic wand tool. And they're all ways that Photoshop gives you to select portions of the image that you're working with. So if I select the circular one here, I can and start and just click somewhere and drag, it creates a selection, a circular selection. And so I could hit Control C, which is copy, and then Control V, which is paste. And so I just copied that portion of whatever image was selected. And so there that is, and I can work with that and move it somewhere else or whatever if I want to. So I can select things with an elliptical marquee. I can use the rectangular marquee tool. Here's a rectangular one. If I want to force it to not be rectangular, but force it to be square, I can hold down the Alt key, I think it is. Yeah, so the Alt key, notice, let me click right here. The Alt key will keep it, let's see, is that a perfect square? It still looks kind of rectangular. Maybe it's Control. Nope, it's not Control. Oh, it's Shift. So if I hold down the Shift key and drag my marquee, it forces it to maintain aspect ratio. So in other words, it creates a perfect square. It does the same thing on the circular, the elliptical marquee tool. If I hold down the Shift key and drag that, it'll make a perfect circle and will prevent you from doing a selection that looks like that, which is an ellipse. So those are the same kind of selection things that you'll have in a tool like Paint, right? You probably can do circular or rectangular selection. I know you can at least do rectangular selections. I think that's what that top row do. So yes, that's select. So you can do a freeform one. So it gives you two basic options. It gives you a rectangular and a freeform selection. Is all that Paint gives you. What about Paint 3D? Where's the select? It looks like that. So you just click select. It does have a magic select option, so it's trying to kind of mimic something I'm going to show you in Photoshop. I would be surprised if it works so well, but at least adds that in. So you've got,
I can select this, I can move it around and
Okay.
control it how I want.
Yep. All right, cool. Yep, Photoshop lets you do that stuff. So one of the handy things that Photoshop provides is this, like the lasso tool, for example. The lasso tool will let me click a particular area, and then I can just kind of draw the selection that I want to select. Let me go, actually, let me escape that. Let's see, I don't want that. Let me go back to the background. Unclick all of these layers here. Just work with my background image. So here's my background image. And so let's say, for example, I just want to cut my head out of this, right? I can just sort of do a rough, use the lasso tool to kind of go around and do something like that. Now that's not very accurate, right? If I copy that and paste it on the screen, there's still, where am I? Am I hiding there? Whoops, wrong one. There I am. So here's the head that I just cut out there, right? I've got some of the background here. I cut some of my hair off, right? So it's not super accurate. I could really take my time. I could increase the size of this image. I could make it a lot bigger, maybe bump it up to 200% here. And then I could go over here and if I wanted to select that, I could click this tool again. And so now it's a lot bigger and I could take my time and be a little slower and trying to cut everything out. But it's still kind of time consuming. So Photoshop gives you this tool called, let's see. Come on. When I start clicking and it doesn't do anything, I wonder if it's about to crash. I just realized last night this computer only has 8 gigabytes of RAM on it, and my other machine at home has 16, but it's a beast. It's hard to carry around, and so I need to upgrade the RAM on this. That might be part of what's happening. Come on, there we go. So the magnetic lasso tool is the one that I wanted to show you. So the magnetic lasso tool lets you kind of draw around the edge, and you can go a little quicker. And Photoshop tries to basically match the edge of wherever you're drawing. So it does actually a pretty good job of, whoops, I messed up. I started in the wrong spot. That was my fault. But now we're gonna cut that portion of it. Let me take this back down to, we'll do 60%. So now if I copy that, oh, I keep doing the wrong thing. There we go. So now that's a much better copy, right? It doesn't have the extra stuff in it like the other one had. And I can even after the fact, if I wanted to, if I'm like, that doesn't look good on the edge there, I could go back to my, not my magnetic lasso tool, but let's try the polygon lasso. What the polygon lasso lets you do is you kind of click and it creates straight lines between everywhere you click. And you can kind of create weird shapes, right? I could create a pentagon, for example, and just copy that pentagon shape out of the middle of my chest there. But if I wanted to just trim this part off of the selection that I did, I could kind of just select that area and then cut it, and now it's gone. So that's some kind of powerful stuff as far as selections go. One of the coolest things with selections is this magic wand tool. And so, like I said, one of the things, was it on here or was it yours? It had the magic, it was yours, right? So I'm assuming it's the same kind of idea that with the magic wand selection tool, what it tries to do is it tries to get everything that kind of matches that color. So if I select, if I'm on the background image here and I click right here, notice it selects just that lighter region. So it says, okay, there's a distinct color difference here in the area that you're clicking. So I'm going to try to get everything that sort of matches that color. And it does a good job. It recognizes that even though there's some kind of erased writing on the board down here, it's still pretty light compared to the surrounding region. So it actually did a good job of getting all of that. And, I could potentially, if I wanted to just, for example, capture the shirt here, that's going to be a lot harder because there are too many different colors in there, but you can adjust the tolerance of it. So if I bump the tolerance of this, I told you you've got the toolbar options up here where you can set different things. For every tool that you select, these options are going to change out depending on which tool you're selecting. And so I can adjust the tolerance to say something like 60, and the shirt may be a bad choice, but let's just see what happens if I do that. Now, if I select it, oh, look at it, it selected a lot more at that time, but it's actually way more than what I wanted. So the shirt is not going to be a good test image. Let's try the shadow here. So the shadow got all of that because my tolerance was so high. My face got all of that. But this is kind of cool. Let me show you this. So it selected that portion of my face. I'm going to take the tolerance down a little bit to 50 here. If I hold down the shift key, I can add to my selection. So I'm going to hold down my shift key, and now I'm going to click my hair area. And so now it's selected that. And now I'm going to, still holding the shift key down, I'm going to click this portion of my face, and now it's selected a bunch more. It accidentally selected some stuff over here on the board. We can try to fix that in a second. So I'm just going to kind of click in all these areas that are accidentally getting selected. I'm sorry, that are not selected, and kind of add the different, try to pick those up. And so I could do that. And then I could take, I could come back over here to maybe my lasso tool. And now I hit, instead of shift, I'm going to hit the alt key. Nope, not the alt key, the control key. Nope, I thought it was alt. Yeah, alt. There's a little negative on my selection that you can't really see that well, but that will allow me to kind of select the region that I want to take out of the selection that's there. So I'm going to kind of select all of that. And so now I've sort of selected my face again, with the exception of this region in the middle here. So I'm going to hold the shift key and I'm going to just kind of select in this area here, and it's going to select all the stuff that wasn't selected in the middle of my face. So then I was able to do that. So just a variety of ways to, and here's that selection that I made. A variety of ways to sort of select portions of your image, which makes it really nice when you're trying to do something like I did in this photograph where I'm combining multiple images together, right? So the selection stuff is pretty powerful. And I know for sure that none of the paint tools are going to have all the selection options that Photoshop gives you, but maybe GIMP does. So that's kind of, that would be something that I would kind of check to make a decision if I want to go with GIMP or, you know, pay the money for Photoshop. The nice thing with GIMP is it's totally free, right? So it's kind of hard to beat totally free. Transformations. Let's talk about transformations real quick. So another thing, you know, that kind of stands out to me as being pretty powerful with Photoshop is its selection capability, right? So that's kind of a key feature that distinguishes it from many of the tools out there. I think it gives you a lot of power as far as selecting the information that you're trying to get to, or that you're trying to pull out of the original image that you're working with. So that's pretty powerful. Transformations are kind of cool. So let's say on this particular version of my face right here, let me hide the other one so we can see just that one. So for this one here, you know, I can take it and for that layer, I can transform it. So there's scale, rotate, right? So I can choose scale, and that gives me the ability to drag it and make my face bigger. It's kind of scary. That's all scale will let you do, right? Shrink it and make it large, shrink it down or make it larger. Instead of scale, I can use I could, for example, do the rotation tool. So that gives me the ability to kind of rotate it, orient it however I want to. But one of kind of a cool tool, and I don't know if you notice, I'm going up here and I'm clicking either check or the little, you know, don't do it, the cancel option if I don't want it to maintain whatever effect I just did on it. But I'm going to choose free transform. And so free transform kind of builds a bunch of those things into one single transformation. So this one here allows me to both rotate and also scale, and it also lets me kind of skew the image. So I could grab it here and let's see, where is it that I do that? Somewhere. Is it this? No, I thought it would let me skew it as well. I guess the free transform only lets you rotate and kind of adjust the size. So it lets you do both of those together. Skew means I can sort of just take one portion of it and shift it. So let me go to skew here. So now I can kind of, maybe I can adjust. Yeah, look, I can adjust the thing that my camera was doing, how it was making my head sort of slanted that way. I can kind of move it that way and make it not so pointy on this end here, right? So that's more what it should have looked like. So skew allows me to do that, or I can make it even worse, right? Can skew it that way. Let's see what other quick transformation options there are. Distort, let's see what that does. This is not one that I use very often. Oh, so that just kind of grabs that portion. So has anybody ever seen the movie Sky High?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. So you notice how there was that one, the chemistry teacher, the mad scientist, he kind of had the big head, right? I could do that to my head. I can make Captain Chemistry have the big brain there and skew it like that, or sorry, distort it like that. And let's see what else we got here. We've got a perspective. So I'm not sure what perspective is either. That's something that I don't use very often. Oh, so it sort of did the same thing, but I didn't have to grab both corners. It just kind of handled both of them together. So a lot of different options there as far as transforming your image. You can do the whole image, or you can apply it just to a layer. So any kind of transformation you want to do, Photoshop's pretty much going to have that in there. So how do your tools compare to that? Are there transformation options at all in Paint? Do you see anything that's similar to that? Like if you draw, so let's just draw something on it. Pick a paintbrush. Just kind of There you go, draw something in. So see, there's no way that I know of to, like you could rotate. So that was one thing that we did, right? It allows you to rotate and it allows you to resize, but that's pretty much it. You can't do any of the distortion stuff that we just did. Just rotate and resize is all that it provides. So you've got some stuff here in Paint 3D that allows you to rotate and flip it. Yeah, okay. And there was a flip feature too on Photoshop that I didn't show you guys. Did it allow you though to skew it and or I thought it was doing it. Did it make it bigger? Not any of that.
I was able to do the.
Z-axis, yeah. So what did that do?
Kind of like.
It's kind of brought it out to the forefront, so it made it large. So you can do it, bring it forward or bring it backwards. Just rotation stuff. Okay, what about, so that,
I can do pretty much everything.
Everything, yeah,
Photoshop can
cool.
do there.
man, I'm liking him. I gotta check this out. That may be the way that I teach it in the future, just because it's something that everybody has. I'm just gonna have to go through the book and figure out how to do everything that's specific to Photoshop, how to do that in GIMP. So any questions about the transformation aspect of it? Again, those are, it's better than your typical tools. So transformations are kind of an important feature that Photoshop brings to the table. And then filters. Filters are pretty useful also. So let me show you the filters. As I've got the big head there, let's apply a filter. So on that particular layer, I'm going to choose a filter here, and I'm going to let's see what we're going to add. I'm going to pixelate my face. So color halftone. Let's see what that does. Max radius. So there's my face pixelated, right? So there's some different filters that you can add to it. Let's see. I mean, there's a bunch. There's render with a flame. Let's see what that does. A selected path is required to use this filter. So let me see if I choose like this portion of my head, and I go to filter and do, well, it went away. Why did it go away? What was that filter? Pixelate? No. Render, stylize. Does anybody know what I chose a minute ago that gave me that flame thing? I hadn't seen that before. Oh, there it was. It was under render. All right, so let me try selecting that again. And then filter, render, flame. Let's see if it'll work this time. A selected path is, no. Okay, so I guess I need to use the path thing that creates the vector stuff in order to do that. So let's not try that one. How about blur? I use Gaussian blur a lot. So if you want to just sort of blur a particular portion of your image, you can, so see how my face is really blurry there. If you want to take a part of your image, those great shots where something's in the foreground, you want to blur everything that's in the background, right? We could do that. I could put, let's say with my head floating there in the middle, my head was here, but I wanted to blur the entire background so that my head came to the forefront. See, now I'm just kind of got my arm just around my head there in the image. So I'm going to blur my background. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to set that background to a blur of 10. So there, that portion of the image just really stands out and pops in the front, right? So you can apply a blur to stuff, all kind of things. You can play around with that. There's clouds, which is just, I've never found a great useful feature for clouds, but it's just kind of cool that you can add clouds. And where was that? Let's see. Where are you? Tree clouds. Here we go. So clouds. So now we've got clouds behind me there, right? And different filters related to that. I could also do, what was it? There's something that jumped out just then. I haven't tried tree before. I don't know what that means. Tree. It's trying to do something. So here's a tree. All right. What happens if we do that? Click OK.
It's loading.
Yeah, it's thinking about it.
Or does it want?
Just adds a tree. All right, great. Well, there's me with the tree. I don't know really what the point is of the tree, but I would have to play around with that some more. Sharpen, stylize. Was it stylized? No. Let's see. Solarize. What does that do? Okay, that's kind of weird. Like some kind of hippie trip or something. Let's see. Noise, distort. Oh, okay. So you could do this and kind of do like a twirl filter, so it kind of twirls it a little bit in the background, right? And there was something that I used to when I first started playing around with this tool years and years ago, and I thought it was cool. That it would let me do like this sunburst thing. Where's that? Lens flare. So I could do like this. You kind of lens flare in that area there. So a bunch of stuff, right? Creative things that you could add. And I'm showing you all of that because of the assignment today, just to give you some ideas of things that you can play around with in your tool of choice. You may be limited depending on whether you're going to try something like GIMP. Does GIMP have those filters? Do you see anything comparable in that?
There are some filter things that I've seen. Specifics, I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, I can warp things pretty easily
Right.
in here. I can smur and smudge.
Yeah,
and
right.
blur
It's got
and start
smudge
that.
options here. Smudge is over here in Photoshop
Filters here.
where I choose
blur, yeah. Render, yeah.
smudge. Let's see, where's smudge? Smudge is right. Come on.
Yep, I can do.
There's the
you know,
smudge
lens
tool.
flare right here.
So smudge kind of says for this layer here, I can take my finger and just sort of smudge some of it out, right? Just kind of, it's like you run I can make it bigger. Here's my tools up top here. I'm going to use a bigger size smudge. So I'm going to make the size to be 37. And so now when I smudge, it just kind of smudges that portion. Here's my eyes sort of smudged up, right? So you can do all kind of weird things with, I mean, there's just a lot there. There's so much. People like spend all their time learning this tool and mastering this tool, you know, and they do this for a living. There's just a lot in Photoshop. The text tool is really powerful. I've already shown you guys that just briefly, right? But you can easily add text to your image. So there's a whole bunch of fonts here that I can choose from. So we're going to do this. And I've changed the size. What did I change? Somewhere I changed, you know, I hid that, that text menu. No, go away. You're getting in my way. Sorry, Zoom is messing with me here. There we go. So if I go to window, character, there's the character panel. So there's all kinds of stuff that I can adjust in here. This needs to be changed, which is why it's, there we go. So I'm going to set that to 100. All right. So, you know, this text here, like I showed you before, I can center this on the page. I can take the text and make it, it gives you the test more text, right? Of course, you can do things like have the test centered with one another. There's this paragraph panel that'll say, whoops, say I want to make it all centered, and maybe I want to spread it out so that there's more space from top to bottom between the two. So I could adjust that. And now this, let's see. So make it to where it's spread further out. I can click that button there and kind of slant it. I can see somewhere you can, there's some options as far as rotating and things like that. Maybe if I go to type, I don't remember. There's a lot that you can do with text as well, and play around with that. And that's going to be sort of important in whatever tool you use with the assignment that we have today, right? So there's a lot of stuff in the type tool. If you're going to use Photoshop, he's got kind of a handy shortcut list on page 64 in the book. I'm not going to test you on that. you know, these to me are some of the things that make Photoshop sort of stand out, you know, and I would say also probably its text capability as well. Just kind of 5 features that it just does a really good job of handling that. And there's a lot of power in those features. So the assignment for this week is this. This is our kind of first really creative assignment. And what I want you to do this week, in addition to reading, I want you to read through, just kind of glance over the stuff. Again, I'm not going to do a heavy test on the stuff that's in here, but I just want you to at least be sort of familiar with the stuff that Photoshop has to offer. We've talked through this in class, so I want you to read pages 52 through 63. All right, just to kind of get an overview of what Photoshop has to offer, and look at your vocabulary terms and vocab, page 65, right? So next week we will have a short quiz over the stuff that's in this chapter here before I give you a test on this information. So short quiz next week, quiz next week. And your assignment is, I want you to pick a scene or take an image. And it could be hand-drawn or photograph, whichever you prefer. Some of you guys are really creative and like to draw, so I don't want to limit you if you enjoy doing that sort of stuff. And add a related Bible verse. So, you know, if it's hand drawn, the heavens declare the glory of God. So you draw some sort of picture with the sky, right? Whether it be the planets or the clouds in the sky or whatever, you know, or you take a photograph that matches that. So some sort of related Bible verse, find a Bible verse that you like and an image that's related to that. And I want you to incorporate the Bible verse into your image. Again, this is a creative assignment. So, you know, be creative. Be creative in using your tool of choice. So you can use whatever tool you want. GIMP has a lot of the features that we saw in Photoshop, apparently, as Daniel was going through there. But the problem is, you know, that's going to be, there may be a significant time investment in trying to learn how to use GIMP if you've never used it before. So I told you guys last week, kind of get familiar with the graphics tool that you were going to be using, so that you'd be sort of ahead of the game for the assignment this week. And you're going to share your graphic with the class next week. All right. So whatever your graphic is, it's something that you're going to share with the class. And I want you to not spend a lot of time, but just briefly explain to us how you created it. Right. So if you come in here and really wow us with something that you did, we're like, how did you do that? You got to be able to explain to us how you did that. Okay. So share with class and explain how. We may ask you questions too, like why did you choose the file size that you did, right? Things like that. So have an educated answer for things like that as well. All right. Any questions about the assignment this week? Everybody got it? All right. Again, this is not, you're not going to be graded on how impressive it is, right? Whether or not it's going to be hanging in the High Museum of Art in Atlanta, right? That's not how we're going to grade you. But I just want to see that you invested the time to play around with the tool. And, you know, you're trying to be creative. You maybe use some obscure features or something in your tool, something that makes your image unique. Okay. All right. You guys have a great week, and I will see you next week, Lord willing.